The day I told my husband I had lost my job, he didn't even blink. His lips curled into a cruel smile, and the first word out of his mouth was useless. That single word shattered 8 years of marriage. Hours later, I heard him laughing with his mother about my so-called failure. And then came the dagger. Another woman's name, Sophia, 6 months pregnant. In that instant, I knew they weren't just mocking me. They were plotting to erase me. My name is Natalie Carter. I'm 30 years old, living in a high-rise apartment overlooking downtown Chicago. For nearly a decade, I built a career in marketing, the kind of career that paid every bill while Ethan chased one doomed startup after another. I thought I was supporting a dream, but in reality, I was funding my own replacement. That morning started the same as countless others. I stacked pancakes on a plate, poured fresh orange juice into a glass, and set down his coffee exactly the way he liked it. Black, steaming hot, no sugar. Ethan never looked up. His eyes were glued to his phone, fingers flying across the screen, as though he were negotiating a billion-dollar deal. I tried to keep my tone calm. The team dinner is tonight at 7. I'm hosting at the new steakhouse on Michigan Avenue. He didn't glance at me. Real entrepreneurs don't waste time on corporate dinners, Natalie. Some of us are trying to build something that matters. The spatula trembled in my hand before I set it carefully on the counter. The sound of butter hissing in the pan was louder than the beating in my chest. 3 days earlier, I had been promoted to vice president of marketing, $200,000 a year. My boss hugged me, told me I had transformed the department. I should have come home with champagne, but I remembered the last time I got a raise. Ethan mocked me in front of his brother, joked about being a kept man, and later accused me of trying to emasculate him. His pride crushed my joy, so I folded the letter into my purse and carried it home like contraband. Now Ethan slammed his travel mug on the counter, coffee splashing over the rim. Mike wants to meet early about the pitch deck. This could be the one, he said. I knew Mike hadn't returned his calls in weeks, but I stayed quiet. Then Ethan finally looked up, jaw tight. Mom's coming this weekend. She'll help us organize our finances. Our finances? I was the one paying bills, refinancing leases, renegotiating every contract to keep us alive. What exactly needs organizing? I asked. His eyes narrowed. Maybe if you weren't so controlling, I wouldn't need her advice. That evening, Ethan texted that he was stuck late, but Instagram told the truth. Mike was at Wrigley Field, beer in hand. Minutes later, Ethan stepped onto our balcony, phone pressed to his ear. Through the glass, I watched him transform. His shoulders straightened, his laughter returned, his face lit with joy I hadn't seen in months. He looked alive, but he wasn't alive for me. When he came back inside, I asked softly, "Who was that?" "Mike, about tomorrow's meeting." His eyes slid away from mine. 5 minutes later, Mike posted another photo from the game. I dried my plate slowly, the silence heavy, charged, like air before a storm. I didn't realize it then, but the real test of my marriage had already begun. By this weekend, Ethan said as he walked past me, Mom will help us organize everything. Don't worry about it. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment telling me where you're from, because stories of betrayal like this stretch across oceans. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because what happened next showed me just how deep my husband's lies can. The morning after Ethan called me useless, the rhythm of our life ticked like a broken clock. 6:47, coffee in his mug. 6:48, a dismissive remark about my career. 6:52, the sound of the door slamming. He thought I was at home wallowing, maybe scrolling through job listings. But I was watching, I was listening, and I was ready to see who my husband truly was when he thought I had nothing left to give. That afternoon, the apartment filled with his voice. I cracked the bedroom window just enough to let the sound carry in from the balcony. At first, it was ordinary. His tone confident, animated. Then it shifted. He said her name, Sophia. My pulse pounded as I gripped the windowsill. His words came clear. The baby was due in 3 months, 6 months pregnant. While I had been planning our anniversary dinner, he had been planning a future with someone else. He laughed as he told his mother that I had finally failed. My so-called downfall was their victory. Margaret's voice floated back through the open window, praising his foresight, telling him she had predicted this moment. They spoke about me like I was an obstacle removed from their path, not a wife who had carried the weight of our life for years. I pulled back from the window, heart racing, forcing myself to breathe quietly. Everything I thought I understood about my marriage had tilted off its axis. The man I had defended to friends, the man I had sacrificed for, was celebrating my supposed collapse with his mother. And worse, they were already preparing to slide Sophia into my place. That evening, I cooked for one. Ethan texted that he was at a meeting, but social media told the truth. His colleague Mike was at Wrigley Field, nowhere near a pitch deck. Minutes later, Ethan appeared on the balcony again, pacing as his voice rose with excitement. Through the glass, I watched his entire body transform. He laughed like the man I had fallen for years ago. But this version of him belonged to someone else. When he came back inside, I steadied my voice. "Who are you talking to?" He didn't flinch. "Mike. About tomorrow's meeting." His eyes slid past me, his lie delivered with ease. I forced a smile. Sounds important. But inside, I was shaking. My husband could lie without hesitation, without shame. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, a decision formed. I would give Ethan one final test. I whispered the words into the dark, letting them roll off my tongue until they sounded natural. "Honey, I got fired." Each repetition cut deeper, but I knew it was the only way. If he loved me, he would show it when I was at my lowest. If he didn't, the truth would surface, and I would have the proof I needed. By morning, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready to see the man behind the mask, ready to hear what he would say when I delivered the lie that would change everything. The next morning, I slipped into the role I had been rehearsing all night. I walked into the living room still wearing my navy blazer, my purse heavy on my shoulder, my heart pounding so loudly. I thought Ethan would hear it. He was sprawled on the couch with his laptop, scrolling as if he had investors begging for his time. In reality, I knew he was refreshing forums, chasing shadows. I let my voice tremble as I spoke the words, "Honey, I got fired." It was like striking a match. His fingers froze over the keyboard. His eyes snapped up, and for the first time, I saw something raw flash across his face. Not worry, not disappointment, rage. He slammed the laptop shut so hard it made me jump. His face twisted, his voice rising like I had betrayed him. "Of course you did. You're useless, Natalie. Absolutely useless. You can't hold down a job at 30 years old. What am I supposed to do with you?" My stomach lurched. Not once did he ask why. Not once did he ask if I was okay. He didn't even consider the possibility of layoffs or restructuring. His only concern was himself. I whispered, "I'm sorry," because it was all I could manage. He paced the room, running his hands through his hair. "Sorry doesn't pay the bills. Sorry doesn't fix the disaster you've created. I need to call Mom. She was right all along." I stumbled into the bathroom, locked the door, and sank to the floor. My back pressed against the wood, my chest heaving as his voice carried through the walls. The rage in his tone softened into something worse, triumph. "You were right, Mom." She finally screwed up, fired completely. "I told you it was coming." Then silence, broken only by his laugh. My pulse roared in my ears. They had been waiting for this, hoping for this, anticipating my fall as if it were inevitable. But why? I had paid our bills, saved our lease, stretched my salary to cover every failed venture. And now, my supposed failure was their reason to celebrate. I sat on the cold tile, staring at the purse where my promotion letter was still hidden. The truth burned inside me. I had never been stronger, never been more successful, yet the people closest to me wanted me broken, small, erased. That night, Ethan sat on the couch watching basketball highlights, a beer in hand, while I lay in bed replaying his words over and over. The man I thought would protect me had chosen to expose me. The family I thought I had married into was plotting against me. By 3 a.m, a new decision crystallized. I would stop hoping he would see my worth. I would stop waiting for his support. From now on, I would turn every lie he told into a weapon. If Ethan and his mother thought I was finished, they were about to learn how dangerous it was to underestimate me. The following day, I carried myself like a woman defeated. I sat at the kitchen table with tissues scattered around me, my laptop open to fake job postings. To Ethan, I looked like a wife grasping for entry-level roles. Inside, I was building something entirely different. My phone buzzed with messages from my team congratulating me again on the VP position, but I ignored them in his presence. He had to believe I was powerless. He had to think the stage was his. By late afternoon, the knock came. I had been dreading. Margaret didn't knock gently. She swept into the apartment like she owned it. Her perfume filled the space before her words did. "Justin, darling," she called, dropping a manila envelope onto the coffee table. I brought the papers from the lawyer. I lingered in the hallway, ears sharp, heart thudding. She flipped through documents with the ease of someone rehearsed. "Since the lease is in your name, this is simple. We document her non-payment. Within weeks, she'll have no choice but to leave." My breath caught. Non-payment. I had covered every rent check for 2 years. Yet here she was, rewriting the truth with a pen. "What if she fights it?" Ethan asked. But his voice was casual, almost curious. "With what money?" Margaret scoffed. "She's unemployed now. No savings after funding your ventures. She'll be grateful for whatever you offer." Her tone dripped with disdain. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. 8 years of sacrifice, reduced to a bargaining chip. My so-called family believed I was worthless. I wanted to storm into the room, throw down my promotion letter, expose their lies. But I didn't. That choice, holding back, was mine. It would infuriate some people, maybe even seem foolish. But I knew if I acted too soon, they'd twist the story. I needed everything lined up. One strike that would leave them no escape. Ethan's voice grew softer, almost eager. "What number are we talking about?" Margaret's reply was sharp, decisive. $5,000, a generous start over, enough for a security deposit somewhere modest. I bit down on my lip until I tasted blood. $5,000 for 8 years of my life, for the furniture I bought, the vacations I paid for, the very roof over our heads. I wanted to scream, to laugh, to ask if they honestly thought I could be bought out of my own marriage for the price of a used car. But I stayed still, because their arrogance was the very rope I would use to hang their scheme. As Margaret packed up her papers and Ethan nodded along, I walked silently to the mirror in our bedroom. I practiced the face of a woman beaten down, the eyes hollow, the mouth trembling, the spirit cracked, and then, slowly, I allowed a smile to spread. They thought they had me. They thought I would accept $5,000 and vanish, but I was no longer the wife they dismissed. I was the woman preparing to turn their own plot against them, and soon they would learn that nothing is more dangerous than someone who has been underestimated for too long. The morning after Margaret's visit, I felt a new kind of calm. On the surface, I was still playing the role of the broken wife, scrolling through job boards with tissues piled high beside me. But underneath, I was moving pieces across a different board entirely. The first move was calling Rachel, my closest friend since college, who also happened to be one of the sharpest attorneys in Chicago. I told her I needed to meet immediately. Rachel didn't flinch when I arrived at her office clutching a folder of evidence. She listened as I described the fake job loss, Ethan's cruelty, the overheard conversations, the envelope Margaret had brought. Her jaw tightened, but her voice was steady. "You've been documenting, right?" she asked. I slid my phone across the desk, screen glowing with a folder of recordings. Ethan's voice. Margaret's plotting. Dates, times, details. Rachel scrolled, then looked up at me with a glint in her eyes. "Good. Very good. Natalie, this isn't just betrayal. This is strategy. They want you out, but you're going to turn this around." She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick binder. I've handled enough messy divorces to know what comes next. Movers, storage, locksmith, even a short list of apartments that can be leased within days. You won't be caught scrambling. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight in my chest lighten. My enemies thought I was cornered, but I had allies too. That evening, Ethan came home whistling. He stood in the doorway, watching me type into my laptop. "Any leads today?" he asked, casual as if he cared. I sniffled, dabbing my eyes with a tissue. "A few assistant jobs. Not much." He grinned, poured coffee into his mug, and dropped the dagger. "Sometimes we need to be humble, Natalie. Start over. Take what we can get." Then he said it. "Maybe Mom's right. $5,000 is more than fair. You'll have a fresh start. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." My stomach twisted. $5,000. The same number Margaret had whispered. The insult burned into me. But I let my lip tremble, my shoulders sag. I whispered, "You're being so generous." "Thank you." His smile widened, smug and satisfied. He thought he had me exactly where he wanted. Later, alone in the bathroom, I stared at my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked broken. But beneath the surface, I was sharper than ever. They believed I would take scraps and vanish. What they didn't know was that Rachel had already prepared the paperwork. Movers were on standby, and a new apartment was waiting for me on the Upper West Side. That night, Ethan texted Sophia. "She's leaving tomorrow morning." Finally, I watched the words glow on his screen while he slept beside me, his breathing deep and steady. My hands shook, not from fear, but from anticipation. They thought I was powerless. In reality, I was about to orchestrate the kind of exit they would never see coming. The night before my departure, I staged the apartment like a set for a performance. 2 suitcases dragged from the closet stood upright by the door. Clothes folded neatly inside, shoes tucked carefully in the corners. To Ethan, it would look like surrender. To me, it was theater. Every detail was meant to convince him that I had finally broken under the weight of my own failure. At dawn, he appeared in the doorway, already dressed, his face brighter than I had seen in months. "Need help with those?" he asked, his tone dripping with false kindness. I shook my head. "I've got it." He lingered as I zipped the last bag shut, pretending to scroll on his phone, but sneaking glances at the suitcases. For a moment, he even started to whistle. The sound of it cut deeper than any insult. My husband was celebrating the idea of my departure. "I booked an Uber for 8, I said, holding up my phone with a fabricated confirmation screen. "My flight's at 11:30. I'll stay with my sister in Boston until I figure things out." His lips curved into a smile he couldn't hide. "Fresh start. That's good for you, Natalie. Don't worry. I'll cover things here until you're back on your feet." His generosity was an insult, dressed as compassion. But I lowered my eyes and whispered, "You're being very understanding." "Thank you." By 7:45, the bags were staged by the door. My key, placed neatly on the entry table. Ethan hovered, texting constantly, his fingers moving quickly. I imagined Sophia on the other end, receiving updates about my so-called exit. She's packing now, almost free. At exactly 8 o'clock, Ethan grabbed his jacket. "I've got a networking breakfast. Text me when you land." His voice was light, casual, almost joyful. He kissed my shoulder awkwardly, the first physical contact in weeks, and walked out the door. I counted to 60, then exhaled. The moment the lock clicked behind him, the performance ended. I dragged the suitcases away from the door, threw them open, and began returning clothes to drawers. Within minutes, the apartment was restored, but the kitchen became my war room. On the table, I laid out everything I had collected: the promotion letter with its golden letterhead, the ultrasound photos, the screenshots of messages, the credit card statements, the recordings labeled with dates and times. Each piece told the story of betrayal. Together, they were undeniable. By mid-morning, Rachel arrived with her leather portfolio. She spread her documents next to mine, her sharp smile steady. "Lease termination agreements," she said, tapping a stack. "Financial fraud, hidden assets, breach of quiet enjoyment. You have grounds to take everything. Movers are on standby. A locksmith, too, if needed. And the new apartment is ready whenever you are." I ran my hands over the papers, feeling their weight. "What about the offer?" $5,000 to disappear, Rachel laughed. "Document it. That so-called generosity only strengthens your case. It shows bad faith." At 11:30, I stood on the balcony, staring out at the city below. Taxis honked, people hurried across intersections. Life carried on as though mine hadn't shifted. 8 years ago, Ethan carried me over this threshold, drunk on champagne, whispering, "It's you and me against the world." Now I stood alone, ready to face him, not as a wife, but as an opponent. The sound of keys at noon made me straighten. The door creaked open, and Ethan stepped inside, whistling, his bag slung over his shoulder. He froze when he saw the kitchen table. The promotion letter gleamed under the light, flanked by a wall of evidence. His laptop bag slipped from his hand, landing with a dull thud on the floor. I picked up the mug in front of me, steadying my hands around the porcelain. My voice came out calm, sharp, every word deliberate. "Going somewhere, Ethan." The color drained from Ethan's face as he stared at the table. The golden letterhead of my promotion letter caught the sunlight like a spotlight, surrounded by ultrasound photos, printed emails, credit card statements, and screenshots of messages he thought I'd never see. His mouth opened, then closed again. For once, the man who always had a quick answer was speechless. "Sit down," I said, my tone cold, deliberate. He didn't move. His hand clutched the doorframe, as though it might keep him standing. When he finally lowered himself into the chair across from me, his hands trembled against the polished wood. "Ethan," I began, keeping my voice steady, "Sophia's baby is due in 3 months. Do you plan to raise her in this apartment, in the room we once called a nursery?" His lips parted, but nothing came out. His chest heaved. And then finally, "Natalie, I can explain." I cut him off. "Explain what?" "How you paid for her rent with a credit card I didn't know existed. How you laughed with your mother about me being useless. How you plan to give her the life I built with my own salary." He swallowed hard, searching for words, but I didn't give him time. I pressed play on my phone, and his own voice filled the kitchen. "She finally screwed up, Mom. Fired completely. You were right all along." Margaret's reply echoed clear. "She'll be grateful for whatever you offer. Maybe $5,000 to start over." Ethan flinched at the sound of his mother's voice, his body curling inward. "You recorded us. New York is a one-party consent state," I said calmly. "Every call, every whisper, every cruel word. It's all admissible. You thought you were playing chess, but I was documenting every move he buried his head in his hands. Please, Natalie, this isn't what you think. Oh, it's exactly what I think. It's betrayal. It's fraud. It's erasure. I slid the lease termination papers across the table. Sign these. Pack what belongs to you, nothing more. Leave today. He reached for the pen, his hand shaking, when the intercom buzzed. I froze, my chest tightening. Then, Roberto's voice, our doorman, crackled through. Mrs. Carter, your mother-in-law is here. Perfect timing. Moments later, Margaret swept into the apartment, her heels striking the hardwood with authority. Her eyes darted to the table, then to Ethan, slumped in the chair. What is this circus? She hissed. I held up my phone, still recording. It's called the truth. Please, have a seat. Her lips curled. You think you're clever. You think you can humiliate us with your little recordings. I tapped the screen, and her own words spilled into the room. That Natalie was never good enough for our family. Too ambitious. Too independent. Real women know their place. Her face blanched, fury flashing in her eyes. You wouldn't dare share that. I leaned forward. Try me. I can send this to your country club, your church group, every board you sit on. Shall I? Ethan groaned. Mom, please. Silence, she snapped. But the fear in her voice betrayed her. She turned to me again. This isn't over. Before I could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with Sophia's name and a photo of her smiling, hand resting on a visible baby bump. Margaret's face froze. Ethan lunged for the phone, but I was faster. I swiped to answer and held it up on speaker. Justin, baby. Sophia's voice rang bright and sweet. The movers are scheduled for tomorrow morning. Is the apartment ready? The doorman said there was some confusion. The silence in the room was electric. Ethan's mouth moved, but no sound came. Margaret stiffened in her chair. I spoke clearly, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. Hello, Sophia. This is Natalie, Justin's wife. A pause, then a shaky breath. But Justin said you were gone. Yes, I said evenly. That was the plan. But plans change. The apartment is not yours. It was never his to give. For 2 years I've paid for this home. Every rent check, every bill. And while you were dreaming of nurseries, I was documenting every lie. Her voice cracked. But the baby. He promised. Ask him about his promises. I interrupted. Ask him about the 3 failed startups I funded. Ask him how he planned to offer me $5,000 to disappear. You'll find out what his word is worth. Sophia's voice trembled. Justin, is this true? Ethan buried his face in his hands. Sophia, please, just... I ended the call and placed the phone back on the table. The silence that followed was thicker than concrete. Margaret lunged forward, her voice shrill. You manipulative little... I held up the phone, finger hovering over the screen. Careful, I have hours of recordings, every cruel word, every scheme. I'll send them out with one tap. Her mouth snapped shut, fury radiating from every line of her face. A knock at the door interrupted us. I opened it to find 2 movers standing in the hallway, clipboards in hand. We're here for Mr. Martin's belongings, one said. Ethan shot up from his chair. No, wait, this isn't. But it was. They moved swiftly, carting out garbage bags and boxes as Margaret followed behind, shouting threats. I stopped them at the espresso machine, holding up a receipt on my phone. Purchased with my bonus. That stays Ethan's face crumpled as another piece of his false empire slipped away. By 4 o'clock, his life was packed into boxes. Margaret clutched his arm, her face twisted with rage. At the threshold, she spat. You'll regret this. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of woman you are. I smiled, steady and unflinching. Tell them whatever you want. Just make sure you tell them the truth, too. The door shut behind. Then with a final click, sealing their voices out. For the first time in years, the silence inside felt pure, clean, victorious. When the elevator doors closed on Ethan and Margaret, I pressed my back against the door and let the silence wash over me. For the first time in 8 years, the quiet didn't feel suffocating. It felt like freedom. My knees buckled, and I slid down to the floor, tears rushing out. Ugly, gasping sobs I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. They weren't tears of defeat anymore. They were the release of poison, the purging of every compromise I had made for a man who never deserved them. By the time the tears stopped, the apartment looked different. It was no longer the stage for Ethan's lies or Margaret's schemes. It was mine. Every chair, every photograph, every piece of furniture that I had purchased with my own hard work, still standing here, still belonging to me. I walked slowly to the kitchen table, where the evidence still lay in perfect order. I gathered the papers into a folder, placed the recordings onto a flash drive, and locked them in my desk. My war was over. My proof had done its job. That evening, I called my sister Rebecca. The moment she answered, her voice was sharp with worry. "Natalie, did you get to Boston safely?" I laughed softly, shaking my head even though she couldn't see me. "I never left, and I'm not going anywhere." I told her everything. The test, Ethan's cruelty, Sophia's baby, Margaret's plotting, the movers carrying his life out in trash bags. By the end, Rebecca was cursing so loudly, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. 8 years, Nat. 8 years you carried that man. And this is how he repays you? Yes, I said simply. But now I'm done carrying him. We made plans for her to visit. She promised wine, laughter, and the ritual burning of every photo that still hung in my drawers. For the first time, I looked forward to the weekend. Monday morning, I stood before my bathroom mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the broken wife Ethan had tried to make me believe I was. She was sharp, steady, and whole. I wore my charcoal Armani suit, the one Ethan once sneered at for making me look too ambitious. My ruby earrings caught the light, a symbol of my own taste, my own success. At the office, my assistant nearly dropped her pen when she saw me. "Miss Carter, I thought you had a family situation." I smiled, voice smooth and confident. "All resolved. Is everything ready for the quarterly meeting?" She nodded quickly, her eyes wide, as if she were seeing me for the first time. Minutes later, my boss Patricia announced my promotion to the entire department. "Natalie Carter has been instrumental in our growth," she said, her voice proud. "Her vision for digital transformation will define the next decade of our company." Applause filled the room. I stepped to the podium, delivering prepared remarks about strategy and growth. Outwardly, I spoke about market share and campaigns. Inwardly, I thought about Ethan calling me useless. Useless. The irony nearly made me laugh. Weeks passed, and the whispers about Ethan's downfall reached me, like gossip carried on the wind. Friends told me Sophia had left him after learning he was broke, crawling back to her husband with the baby still on the way. Margaret had taken him into her house, where he sulked in his childhood bedroom at 34, his once proud image of a daring entrepreneur reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. One afternoon, I stopped by our old coffee shop, the one I had avoided for months. I ordered my lavender latte and felt a strange peace settle over me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. Ethan, hunched over his laptop, his shirt wrinkled, his hair too long. He looked up, our eyes met, and for a split second, I saw recognition, maybe even longing. He stood, his lips forming my name. I turned fully, my voice steady and sharp. "I don't have time for useless people." I collected my drink and walked out into the sunlight, my heels clicking against the pavement with a rhythm that felt like victory, because this wasn't just a story about revenge. It was about rediscovery. It was about learning that love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until nothing is left. It was about choosing to rise when others wanted to see you fall. And here is the lesson I want you to take with you. Real strength is not in clinging to people who diminish you, even if they share your blood or your bed. Real strength is in knowing your worth, setting boundaries, and walking away from cruelty, no matter how long it has lived beside you. Life is too short to be spent proving your value to people determined not to see it. Love deeply, forgive when you can, but never let betrayal define you. Let it sharpen you, let it free you, and then keep walking, because ahead lies a life more beautiful than anything you left behind.